Today's episode is going to be a quick one, but this is still perhaps one of the most anticipated products on my list for a while. It's the Aqara T2 Smart bulb, and it marks a point that my smart home can now almost exclusively be Aqara branded. Now, for a long time I've been saying that Aqara has lacked lighting options. Sure, they've had a few niche products which are actually part of my smart home. There's the Aqara T1M ceiling light, for example, which is this large panel round light with a halo of RGB lights around the outside. It turns out that's a bit marmitey for you lot. Some of you loved the style and thought it was great, and others thought it was a bit plastic looking. But there's also been the Aqara LED strip lights, which sit behind my desk and have segments which light up individually. And in my case, the central segment lights up a different colour depending on who is at the door, which is actually a really useful automation. But in almost all of these episodes, I've always mentioned a lack of standard retrofit smart bulbs from Aqara. Well, finally, they've gone and released the T2, a colour RGB light bulb that fits E27 fittings. But they haven't just released this, they've gone on and done the full hog. They've got the E27 bulb, both in colour and white spectrum, and GU10 bulbs in white and colour as well. Although I don't currently have any GU10 fittings in the house, so I've not actually been able to test those. So in that case, today's episode will focus mostly on the E27 bulb and specifically the colour option. Now, from a design standpoint, the new T2 bulb range aren't anything to shout home about. They're very much a light bulb. Although saying that, the E27 model isn't your traditional round bulb and instead curves to this kind of flat platform, much more like the Philips Hue style. But although the design isn't anything special, what is special is the functionality, because this little bulb is possibly one of the most versatile smart bulbs that I've come across yet, whilst also having a performance edge over its competitors and a few bits of functionality that, when paired with the Aqara ecosystem, that I've never seen before. Now, from a setup perspective, it's very much like any other Aqara product, but one thing that is relatively new and something that we've seen only on recent Aqara products is the ability to pair this via Thread as default, or you can switch connectivity to Zigbee. This takes a couple of minutes because essentially it rewrites the firmware on the bulb depending on which protocol you're using, but it's fantastic to see that they're essentially allowing or supporting both types of connection. But once in, you've got all the standard control you'd expect from a smart bulb. You've got the ability to control it through the white spectrum and the ability to run through the RGB palette that they've kind of preset, or even the full colour spectrum if you wanted to fine-tune it. But boy, is the colour good. It's very, very accurate across the board and has some fantastic saturation compared to many others I've tried. Purple colours in particular stand out as being very accurate. In other bulbs, purple tends to be a slightly pinkish hue. It seems to be generally a common struggle with smart bulbs, but it's safe to say that with the T2, it's very purple indeed. It's obviously very difficult to show, of course, because this is a camera filming a bulb that's then had the footage processed through my editing software, exported and compressed, uploaded to YouTube, compressed some more, and then finally, you're probably watching this episode a million miles away on an uncalibrated screen of an iPhone 3GS. So, the colour that you're seeing for this is probably quite different to what I'm seeing. But what I can tell you is that the colours are so vivid that if I put on the deepest red, my eyes start to hurt. Possibly even bleed, but the colour is so red that I wouldn't be able to tell you what's coloured red with light or coloured red with blood. Now, not only is the colour excellent, it's brighter than alternatives too. Testing one of the closest competitors that I could find in terms of price and spec, the Aqara kicks out more light at the same colour temperature. Now, there is a small asterisk here. The Aqara bulb is rated at 10.5 watt, and the one that I could closely find was rated at 10 watts. Now, I'm not an electrician, and to me electrics might as well be witchcraft, but even I, with my very basic understanding of electricity, can tell you that a 0.5 difference in wattage shouldn't equal a 30% brighter output. This shows that the Aqara bulb is extremely efficient in converting the electrical input to light output, and I'm more than happy with its performance. But it's not just the raw function, though, that puts these ahead. It's also the software functionality that you get with Aqara that gives these a real edge. You can do things like completely customize the on-off transitions to make them shorter or longer. You can set it to turn on and off instantly, for example, or lengthen the transition right the way up to taking a ridiculously long 10.5 seconds to change state. Within this, you can also change the curvature of transitions too, which means that you can start slow and then suddenly ramp up, or start fast and suddenly ramp down. Now, I'm sure there are other smart bulbs that might let you do that, but this is the first time I've seen it, and it's pretty cool. The slow settings are ideal for things like bedside lights, where, for example, you don't want an instant blinding light searing your eyeballs with the immediate contrast of off or on. The slower and more gradual increase in brightness over 10 seconds if you're getting up at night to go to the loo for the 5th time can be ideal. You can also set the dimming range too, which is handy, although I don't think many people will necessarily play around with this. I don't know, maybe just me. But the last piece of functionality that I want to talk about, outside of the obvious smart bulb system and control, becomes apparent when you pair this up to the new Aqara H1 lights, which we featured recently. The H1 is an awesome device that replaces your regular light switches and allows you to then add smart control to even non-smart bulbs that are attached to the circuit, whilst remaining always on no matter what state the lights are in. Now, normally with smart switches, if the bulb you're using is smart, the switch actually kills off all power to the bulb, so you can't control the bulb independently if the switch is marked as off. For routines, this can get quite confusing if you want to control the bulb. Let's say you want a bulb to flash a certain colour when someone enters your garden. The routine would need to ensure that the switch is turned on, and then you can set the bulb to change its state after, which will only work providing your smart home picks up the bulb quick enough and it reconnects fast enough after it's powered on. Well, if you're using an Aqara bulb with an Aqara switch, the system will allow you to still control the bulb in its entirety, even when the switch is set to off. This in turn means that the routines involving the bulbs will be completely unaffected by the switch's state. And then, when creating routines, you don't have to even consider the state of the switch, making them far more reliable and considerably easier to configure for automations when you've got a combination of smart switches and smart bulbs. This is a cracking functionality and one massive pulling factor to why you might want to try and have a whole smart home kitted with a Aqara kit, because to my knowledge, there's no other manufacturer or solution that would let you achieve this. Maybe Home Assistant has some wizardry that lets you do it with third-party options, but I'm too much of a wuss to delve into the complexity of Home Assistant for now anyway. But incidentally, on that note, these will work with Home Assistant, and they also work with pretty much every other smart home system through Matter, so the compatibility is great. Now, when it comes to the price, I won't beat around the bush here. I had hoped there'd be a smidgen cheaper to make it more accessible to kit the entire house out with smart bulbs. As it stands, the white spectrum bulb is around £20, the colour version is around £23, and the GU10 bulbs are around £19 and £22 for the white and colour versions respectively. Now, Aqara do offer discounts quite often, especially during sale periods, so always check the links in the description for the current price. But I can't complain too much here, I guess, because they are cheaper than the nearest Philips Hue bulb, and considering these are brighter, more colourful, with far better features when paired up to the Aqara system than many competing bulbs, I do think you are getting more bang for your buck, even if there's slightly more bucks than I'd hoped. But the only other thing I would have liked from Aqara with this release would have been an E14 option. Sure, I'm probably being greedy here, but an E14 light fitting for lamps would have been greatly appreciated. And maybe a B22 fitting for those still using British pre-war wiring done by an old man with a can-do attitude. But overall, the new light bulbs, as I said right at the start, are a welcome addition to the Aqara lineup. Perform excellently, allows people to almost exclusively stick within the Aqara ecosystem, and they are just what my doctor ordered. But what do you think of these bulbs? Are they a hit or miss from Aqara? Let me know in the comments below so we can all have a good chinwag over them. And if you want to take a look at them yourselves, I'll drop a link below for you. But other than that, guys, if today's episode helped you decide if the new Aqara bulbs are for you or not, then make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.